Hello, everyone. I'm Dr. Martin Bales, and this is my national trainer, Lindsay Himesh. And we're making this video to help you, our customer, with some of the more commonly asked questions in regard to mainly the Fscan and operations of it around your clinic. I've been working with photobiomodulation devices for over 20 years. My dad actually invented the first non-laser photobiomodulation device in the United States and in 1998. And I was just done with high school, but I was going through engineering in college and was helping him back then. And I went on to get a master's and doctorate of oriental medicine, and photobiomodulation was my primary treatment modality all the years, in addition to some acupuncture and that. So I've had over 50,000 patient visits in my time. I've recently retired from Center for New Medicine in Irvine. And some of the questions that I got, I'd like to address those because there are questions that your patients or yourself will likely be asked. So when I first received the Fscan, we hadn't ported it to the Firefly yet. And everybody came up with this fascicular lupus buski, or most people did. And I was ready to send the Fscan back thinking the thing was crazy, but I stuck out with it. And it turns out that this fascicular lupus buski, and I probably am butchering the pronunciation, I'm sorry, I'm not a pathologist. It's an intestinal fluke. And after seeing it so much and the havoc that it can cause in patients, I believe it's in our food and or water supply, at least in this country. And some people don't have a problem with it, and some people it really causes a lot of health issues, not just gut issues. I'm talking skin issues, the whole brain-gut connection, mental fog, even dementia. I think it's responsible for a lot of things. So if you have that come up on a lot of your patients, I would say about 2/3 to 3/4 of mine came up with it. Don't think the Fscan is wrong. If you have 2 or 3, I even had 4 people in one day come up with the same exact scan. I thought the thing was broken. And I actually, probably unless I'm sick, never scan up with anything, no peaks. So I would actually stop and scan myself just to make sure, and sure enough, no peak, nothing would come up. So I knew that it was reading correctly. So if that does happen, it's going to happen. If you see a lot of people like I did, just know that that's common. You can treat the people. Most likely the Fscan is functioning correctly. So we also had a large cancer center for healing, and it was my notice, and if you do work with cancer or any other chronically ill patients, you're going to notice that fascicular lupus and a bunch of other pathogens are come up, and it makes sense. Those type of patients have a lot of other co-infections because their immune systems are so preoccupied with fighting whatever chronic disease they've had probably for a long time. So again, more from the engineering mind, which I can respect because I'm an electrical engineer first type of patients and spouses. What's the accuracy of the Fscan? And that's hard to answer because it's innate to think, okay, what's the accuracy of the Fscan to blood or stool work? Those are kind of what are thought of as the gold standard in this country. Well, they aren't really a gold standard. Years ago, there was a study, and the link is on the PDF paper that's in our portal, or you can ask any one of us for it, on blood tests. And the gist of it was they sent the same person's blood to 10 different labs and got 10 different results. So it wasn't widely different, but it wasn't, some of them did put it within normal limits and not within normal limits. And then treatment was then wrong for that because it shouldn't have been that way. So we can't really compare the Fscan to blood work. I can just tell you anecdotally, I estimate it's about 75% accurate, which I don't think for a device that costs around $4,000 and with a test that's a minute and a half and doesn't require any blood draw or stool, I think that's pretty darn good. The second is it's really unfair to try to compare energetic testing devices. And in this case, the Fscan is a GSR, or galvanic skin resistance device, to blood and stool work. The classic example I have, and I'm not against taking blood and stool, but just take it with a grain of salt, is the patient comes in, they've been through all the allopathic medicine, their stool is quote unquote normal, their blood is quote unquote within normal limits, and they obviously have something going on, and they've been called crazy because they couldn't find anything and been put on antidepressants. And that's probably the worst thing you can do to a patient. I ran an Fscan, and they come up with Fscan or whatnot, I treat, they get better. That's not every single time, but it's a lot of the time. So the energetic testing devices are much more sensitive than the blood and stool tests, so because they're looking at energies and vibrations and frequencies that these bugs are putting off. So it's not uncommon to find something on the energetic testing first, or maybe you're finding it before you would eventually find it in a blood or stool test. So I conclude that article by saying we're helping most everybody, not everybody. I wouldn't claim that, but at least when I was in practice, I thought I was doing a pretty good job. I know my patients were appreciating it because they were referring a lot of people to me. And as you know, patients don't make referrals if they don't believe in you. So the other thing I want to talk about a little bit is how the Fscan actually works. That's another really common question. So we all know patients holding a cylinder in their left hand and they have this finger clip on their right middle finger. First of all, another question comes up, why the right middle finger? I don't know why exactly. I've tried it on other fingers and gotten the same results. Somebody else tried it on their toe and it came up with the same results. So I don't know. I think it's just a standard that was chosen so the person didn't put it somewhere maybe where it wouldn't work. So this cylinder is putting off frequencies, a little bit like a radar. So it's putting out this frequency, and then it's testing the patient's skin resistance. If you notice, there's two on that finger clip, there's two little pegs between them. So it's measuring skin resistance between them. And when the skin resistance changes, it's showing up as a peak on that derp screen. That's that peak. And by how much the skin resistance changes is the height of the peak. And I want to pause right there with that, because when I first started using the Fscan, I thought, oh, well, if the peak is higher, the patient has more of whatever that is. And I found out that's really not true. I was the one who chose the threshold of 20. It was arbitrary. That was just after scanning a lot of patients. And so I chose 20. As you know, if you don't have a peak that's at 20, you can go all the way down to 15. But if you have anything less than that, I'd recommend rescanning, perhaps after the patient's more hydrated or at a later date. But anyway, the peak is produced from a skin resistance change. It comes up in this DIRP, dual integration resonance procedure. It all goes back to the idea of resonance to destroy pathogens, mainly from Royal Rife's work. If you haven't checked out Royal Rife, R-I-F-E, I would highly recommend checking him out. We're going to have a link to his documentary up in the portal. If the hasn't been taken down yet, I have to check. So technically, we're not saying the Fscan has the ability to diagnose any disease or illness in any kind of population, but it is detecting the energetic resonance frequency of these bugs, and then we're using that to administer a therapy via the Firefly. We're not claiming to treat or to cure or anything like that. It's just administering a therapy. So another question I had is, okay, it's taking changes in skin resistance. What's that all about? Well, the sympathetic nervous system controls our immune system. It also controls our skin. It controls when we sweat, and it also changes the skin resistance when it's given a frequency that's associated with a bug that their systems are fighting. And if you want to go further down the rabbit hole with that, actually pretty allopathic medicine, you can go to PubMed and type in sympathetic nervous system skin resistance, and it'll come up and tell you how the sympathetic nervous system is the moderator of all that. And a gentleman named Voll, I believe, in the late 1800s, was the one that found that. And he's kind of the godfather of all these GSR, galvanic skin resistance devices. Others have certainly put in theirs over the years, but he was kind of the first. So other thing that comes up is someone comes in with kind of the other way around with the blood test and says, oh, my blood test says I have, X, Y, and Z. Why isn't it coming up on your Fscan? Well, number one, the Fscan doesn't have every single thing on Earth in its database. Its database has about 900, I think it's 893 items in it, which is not a lot. I wish it had more. But also, you have to step back a second and say, with all of these GSR energetic testing devices, it's really looking at what the patient's system is fighting, right? It's getting that change, skin resistance change at the frequency. Well, your body can't fight every single thing. We're exposed to just thousands of pathogens every day, just walking down the street. So our immune system is always prioritizing. So we're detecting what it's fighting, not necessarily everything in your system. The beauty of even a semi-functioning immune system is that once it's done fighting what it's fighting, it'll move on to the next. So it will come up eventually in an Fscan, given enough. And like I said, we're just aiding the immune system with our Firefly sessions to be able to overcome that specific pathogen that's fighting. So it's not looking at everything, just what it's fighting, if that answers some questions. Another question comes up is, someone takes an Fscan, and this isn't in usual clinical practice, but some people like to play with it. So they take an Fscan, and hours later they take another Fscan, and it's completely different. And this is usually on patients that are relatively healthy. This happens because the immune system was fighting just a little bit of something, and then either they had a Firefly treatment, which aided them in abating that, or they didn't have a treatment, they didn't do anything, and then they scanned it's different. Well, the immune system changed over because it was just a little thing it was fighting. It was easy, it was fighting it for half an hour or minutes, and it changed over something else. With the chronically ill patients, the Fscan seems to be pretty consistent. We always hope for change, after the 3, 6, or 9 Firefly treatments. But it doesn't always happen because, again, we're really just promoting an immune system. An immune system that's largely dysfunctional is going to take some time and some treatments to come to that conclusion of success. So I think that covers most of what I came up with in clinical practice as far as questions. Lindsay, do you have any other questions that you commonly receive you'd like to ask me?
Yes. One of my questions I get quite often is, why are my frequencies not the same in the Firefly app as they are in my analysis?
Okay, I've ran into this maybe one time in 500 scans or something. Not saying it doesn't happen. And to be honest, I'm going to ask for the help here. I don't know if it's a bug. I have heard of other people rarely getting this. But if it is, what I want the person to try, the operator, is to go back and reset the threshold. So if you're back in the Fscan, threshold's at 20, set it to something else, let it go and sleep across the screen, set it back to 20, make sure to transfer. That's been a big one, the transferring, and then analyze and then export. So try that and re-export a CSV file. Maybe the export was bad on the Fscan side. If that doesn't, if you have a peak there on the derp that, remember, has to be a threshold level or higher. Okay, obviously not going to come if it's not if it's below that, it's not going to be in the export data, and the Fscan's not going to import it. Please get the CSV file to one of us, myself or Lindsay, anybody on the Bayless Photonics team, because I need to have my programmer take a look at that. But please try the transfer in that first.
Perfect. All right, and my next question is, why did my scan come up with only browns and reds and no greens?
Okay, and I had this happen again pretty rarely, but in the scanning or the classification, the color classification, the way the Fscan works is the greens are a good match, would say likely or very likely to be what the patient's immune system is fighting. The browns, not so much, and then the reds, not so much. I don't know why they include the browns and reds on there. I wish that they didn't, because it's just confusing. I used to print the reports for patients, and every time I had a new patient, I had a big black Sharpie and I put a big X through it and make a line and said, okay, only worry about these. And that's an idea for you to have that red Sharpie or right there so you can put an X through.
Yes.
So anyway, it's finding that, or what it found is it's semi-likely or unlikely if it's just browns and reds to come up. Now, then that begs the question, would one treat with that? Well, you could. I don't think it's going to hurt. Obviously, it's ideal if there are greens that you can treat. The other idea at the time, and again, this is in integrated medicine, right? We're all about the patient and the patient's individuality. So you can kind of feel the patient out. You could also just turn the sources over to source 4. Make sure to turn both of them over if you have a Clinic Pro. Channel A and B, turn them over to source 4, because that is that fasciculopus buski. And again, maybe it doesn't come up, but there is a 2/3 to 3/4 chance that they have it. And if it doesn't come up, it's because their immune system's not fighting, but they could still have it. So you can turn that over, and with that probability, be given a treatment with that as well. The other one, I think, that wasn't asked, but what if they're all green, which is the inverse answer? And yes. And that's good. That's really nice. I wish that all of them just had the greens, like I said. Right. And that is that what came up is likely or very likely what the patient had. So run with it. That's great. Go ahead and definitely do the personalized treatment in that case.
Perfect. There's just a couple things I would like to touch on that you had mentioned. those very common scans. I was kind of in the same situation with you where I had like 3 people scan up with the same exact thing. I thought my system was broken. I thought I wasn't transferring. I thought something was going wrong. And again, that I've noticed in households or families where people are in the same home or same unit, they often have the same bugs or pathogens as everybody else in the household because they are exposed to the same environment, same foods, same situations as the rest of the family. That's kind of one thing that I've noticed over time. I did panic that first time too, like what the heck is happening? And I have gotten a few panic calls or emails saying, what's happening? I keep getting the same thing over and over again. Another thing to remember is that transfer button. If it's not the fasciola buscis, I know I'm probably butchering it too. If it's not that scan, but you are getting the same scan over and over again, I do highly suggest going back, making sure that threshold is set properly and transfer. Transferring is one of the most easily forgotten steps, and I do like to drill it into people in my trainings, but before we analyze, we have to transfer, regardless if it is a new scan or one that we are uploading again. If we are trying to look at an old derp, we still have to set the threshold and transfer before we analyze. Another thing I wanted to touch on was we are layers. We have layers. We are like onions. So once we expose that first layer of onion and we get rid of that layer, we're going to open up more. So that's another thing I like to point out to people is we have lots of layers, especially older folks and fortunate people that have been able to travel all over the world. They come back with new things. We are onions. We get rid of one layer at a time. And then the last couple things I want to touch on here, though, is or if we are scanning someone and they are missing an extremity, I do like to mention I had a gentleman who was missing about 3/4 of his arm. So it was on the side where the finger clip was supposed to go. And we ended up clipping the finger clip to the armpit. And we actually got an amazing reading off of that for both of the scans that we did for them. So if you're having someone who's missing an extremity, armpits are also viable. It's a good option. My last couple of things here are if you are in a clinic setting, I do highly suggest that when people first come to you, your receptionist may give them about 8 ounces of water. The Pellegrino is probably one of the better options. Mineral water or Himalayan salt under the tongue with some water, or even just some salt in your water beforehand, about 10 minutes before your session. That will, hydration is really important for skin testing. We will get better results or a better reading when we are more hydrated. One last thing I want to touch on is, say you've tried hydrating and their scans are still not coming up with where we can get 15 to 20% on that threshold. Another option would be to run source 4 on the gut for 5 to 10 minutes. And then Dr. Bales, would you suggest about 24 hours after that they get rescanned, or even
if possible? Sometimes it's harder. We had people, a lot of ours were we call them fly-in patients, where they came in, they were only there for a day or two, and obviously we weren't going to be giving 3 treatments in one day, maybe 2. But yes, ideally, if they could come in 24 hours, just do the Fscan on the next visit. And it's up to you as how you financially run your clinic. I believe in the idea of abundance, and I would have them pay for the Fscan but then not charge them for the Fscan when they came in the next time. It only takes a minute and a half, and with repeat patients, you usually don't have so much to explain, so it goes pretty fast. So that's just and patients really respected that. In fact, a lot of the comments were, "Wow, when I go to the doc, even if it doesn't come up, I pay for everything, and I can't believe only paid for what I'm using." So the patients will respect that, and that will generate more referrals for you as well.
Definitely. And that's all on my end.
Okay, folks. Well, thank you so much for watching. Lindsay and I both hope that this answers some of your questions. If you have other questions, or something else weird comes up in your clinical practice, you can email us at support@balesphotonics.com. That's the absolute best way to reach us. And thanks everybody, and thank you for watching. Bye.